Let's talk about what happens when you plug a pair of headphones or earphones into an amplifier capable of delivering 14 million times more power than those headphones or earphones need. Almost any pair of IEMs and even headphones that you ever try will be incredibly sensitive thanks to the very small size of their drivers. For some numerical perspective, the most difficult to drive IEM that I've ever listened to is the Tin Hi-Fi P2. It was a planar magnetic IEM that I think is probably discontinued now, and it was often spoken of in hushed tones as people discussed how much power you needed available to drive it to sound good. As usual with those types of conversations, it actually has nothing to do with power, but that's a whole nother video and a whole nother conversation. What was true was that the P2s were very difficult to drive. For an IEM, the P2s needed, are you ready for it? Are you sitting down? The P2s needed a whole 0.1 milliwatts to achieve 80 decibels of volume. If that number means nothing to you, a normal safe listening level is considered to be around about 70 to 80 decibels if you're going to be listening or hearing that level of volume for up to 8 hours a day. It's about the noise level of a blender, a noisy restaurant, or a hairdryer. For many people, 80 decibels is already getting a little bit uncomfortable. But what if we look at more normal IEMs? I'm currently preparing a review of the Tangzu Wukong IEMs. These retail for just under $2,000 and they'll achieve that same 80 decibel output level with just 0.001 milliwatts. So imagine now plugging those sensitive IEMs into a headphone amp capable of delivering more than 14 watts into the Tangzu Wukongs. That's over 14 million times the power they require. It sounds like IEM suicide, doesn't it? And it would be, except for the fact that the amplifier I plugged them into has incredible control over that amount of power. It's like a Lamborghini that you could teach your toddler to drive in. That amplifier is the Topping A900. And that was a long intro, but the A900 deserves it. It's not quite as exceptional as the matching D900 DAC from Topping, but it is excellent nonetheless. And I'm going to let the cat out of the bag really early here. The A900 performs exactly as I would expect it to for its $1,199 price tag. It's more resolving or detailed than some lower priced amps or similar priced amps like the FluxLab Mentor and the Alner S17 Pro Evo. But it also can't quite catch up to some more expensive amps like say the Live HP2A. In other words, the A900 sits right in between in terms of performance, just as it also sits right in between in terms of price. And so sonically, it's very, very good, but not exceptional. Where things do get exceptional is when you consider the A900's insane versatility and connectivity along with its sound quality. And by the way, Apos sent me the A900 for review, but they have no influence over this video. You'll notice as we continue this video that there are things that I love about the A900 and some things I wish it did better. As always, I'll tell you all of them. First up, I think the styling of the new Topping DACs and amps is excellent. I think the angular and simple design is elegant and classy. The display and interface they've been using for a while now is also fantastic, but at this point, those are kind of becoming a given and an expectation. And that's especially true in the case of the A900 because you expect an interface of this quality to let you control all the various inputs and outputs you're going to need to control. After all, there are 8 different ways that you can connect headphones to the front of the A900. That's before we even think about the back. There are 2 4.4mm connectors for balanced, and then there are 2 4-pin XLR connections, also for balanced. And then there are 2 more what's called combination connectors. These combo jacks allow for either a pair of 3-pin XLR connectors to make a balanced output, which is a fairly outdated connection style these days, but also you can connect an unbalanced 6.3mm jack into either or both of these combination sockets. And so thanks to this fantastic interface, you can run all of those outputs at once, or you can toggle between them. You can also choose which ones are available to toggle between, so if you're only using a couple of them, you can switch off all the rest, so you only toggle between the ones you use. And so theoretically, you could leave multiple headphones or earphones permanently connected to the A900 and then just choose which one you listen to by toggling between the outputs. On top of that, it will even remember the volume levels based on the input you're using or the output you're using. And so if you select to have the A900 remember the volume level based on the output, you could have a sensitive pair of IEMs connected to one output and a super power-hungry pair of headphones connected to another output. Switch between them and the A900 will make sure that the volume is correct for whichever one you're using. One tip though is that if you are doing that, make sure that the volume level for the all outputs or the all headphone outputs is kept to a low level so you don't accidentally cook your IEMs. Remember, this thing has 14 million times more power than many IEMs will need. And that brings us back to the opening of this video. The A900 also includes a super precise relay-based volume control. That's going to grant you perfect channel matching all the way down to the very lowest volume levels on the dial. And so you can drive IEMs from the A900 because it's got a dead silent background and perfect volume control all the way from 0 up to maximum volume. I've been testing both IEMs and headphones from the A900 lately, and it is perfect for both. And all of this is before we've even turned to the back of the amplifier. On the back of the A900, we've got 3 pairs of those same combination connectors that we saw on the front before. That means that once again we can connect 3-pin XLRs to these, or we can use the balanced TRS connectors, which is a 6.3mm balanced connection, or I expect and believe but haven't tested because I don't own any, that I think you could also use the unbalanced TS connectors, which is the tip and the sleeve only. It doesn't have the extra ring. That means you're going to be plugging in something that looks more like this, but there's a mono version that only has 2 different connection points instead of the 3 that you see on this adapter. And so we essentially have 3 different input choices on the back of the A900, as well as a pair of XLR outputs, which means this can be a preamp as well. And then you've got 12-volt trigger inputs and outputs, as well as your power socket. And so this level of connectivity for the A900 is yet another of its strengths. But it's also here that we start to see where one of its weaknesses lies. The ability to connect up to 3 different DACs or other sources to the A900 will be an absolute bonus for some people. But for others, it's going to be completely redundant. I love the A900 as a testing and comparison amplifier. You, on the other hand, might have no use for that sort of functionality. However, when you realize that this is not only a headphone amplifier, but also a very clean and precise preamplifier, suddenly those inputs might get a bit more interesting. If you have multiple sources you need to connect to your hi-fi system, the Topping A900 could be a great solution for that, as well as being a great headphone amp. In addition to that, Topping talk about the fact that they see the A900 as also being completely at home in a professional recording setup, like a studio type system. But you're probably wondering right now about that weakness I mentioned just a moment ago. Before I tell you about that, I should really quickly mention that the A900 does also come with a remote control. It's a nice aluminium, very solid and weighty feeling remote control, and so as a preamp it will work beautifully in a living room system where you don't want to get up and go over to the amplifier all the time, or preamplifier as we're talking about here. But let's get back to that weakness. The one thing for me that holds the A900 back from utter glory is that it does produce a fairly flat soundstage. And that weakness or characteristic is going to be passed on to your headphones, your earphones, or if you're using this as a preamp, onto your power amp or your active speakers. I can't stress enough that the soundstage from the A900 isn't bad. To the contrary, it's very good. It just lacks some depth and layering. And that's what prevents the A900 from catching up to its more expensive competition, like the Fang Sound Ariadne that I'll be reviewing very soon, or the Live HP2A that I've already reviewed. The A900 can keep up with those on resolution. In some cases, it can even do better on resolution. It also keeps up with them in terms of things like separation of the sounds, the lateral space between sounds within the soundstage, and the focus of sounds within the image. Everything is impeccably placed from the A900. It just doesn't provide the same sense of depth in the soundstage to make it sound like a drummer is behind a lead singer or that the bassoons are behind the violas. Having said that though, many people don't prioritize soundstage depth. If they did, hi-fimen wouldn't be the headphone giant that they are. And so if you're after a headphone amplifier with outstanding soundstage width, separation of sounds, and focus of the image, along with a neutral and uncolored sound, the A900 is going to be probably impossible to beat. And at this point, we should briefly talk about the sound or the tonality of the A900. Many years ago now, one of my first ever video reviews was the Massdrop THX AAA 789 headphone amp. It might not have been my first ever video review, but it was close to it, and the cringe factor is high when I look back on that one these days. Not only because I was still learning how to do this, and I still am, but also because my experience level then was a long way from where it is today. Back then, the 789 amp seemed like it was amazing. More time and more experience has shown me that the 789 was actually a little bit artificial sounding and not entirely natural. For what it was amazing, but it didn't stack up to the natural sound that a Class A design like the shit Asgard 3 was able to deliver at a similarish price. Fast forward to today, and the A900 to me is the maximum evolution of that original THX 789 type amp, at least without going to something even more expensive like a benchmark HPA4. The A900 is a super clean sounding amp that's also incredibly powerful, but wonderfully well controlled and therefore highly versatile. However, there is one big difference between the 789 amp from many years ago and the Topping A900, other than price. To me, the A900 also sounds great. It might be a neutral sounding amp, but it's neither clinical nor artificial in any way that I can hear. This is a headphone amplifier, and a preamp for that matter, that lets you hear the natural or the true bass tonality of the system that you're connecting it to. It won't deliver the lovely subtle richness of the Auner S17 Pro Evo, or the smooth weighty presence of the Flux Labs Mentor, but you might not be looking for that. It's definitely been a great reference point for me when I've wanted to understand the true tonality of the earphones and the headphones that I've been testing lately. And I think that sums the A900 up pretty well. It's a reference kind of amp. It's not as musically enjoyable to me as some other amps I've reviewed, such as the Mentor, the S17 Pro Evo, and the upcoming Fangsound Ariadne. Be sure to subscribe for that one. But I can't think of another amplifier that I would choose at the price if I wanted the maximum level of insight and neutrality for either a listening system where that's what your desire is, or for a system where you properly want to understand the gear connecting to it or the music that you're playing through it. And so if that sounds good to you, if that's the sort of thing that you're looking for, I'll put links in the description down below where you can pick one of these up for yourself. And if you want a fantastic DAC to go with it, the matching D900 DAC might just be flawless for its price, both sonically, but also it looks great with the A900. And to watch my review of the D900 next, I pinned it here at the end for you, because I also think that if you're going to shops like Apos, which I'll link to down below, they often are going to have bundles where you can buy the D900 and the A900 either at a reduced total price or with some extra value thrown in. So watch the D900 video next if you also need a DAC, or use the links in the description if you just need an amp. But for now, a huge thanks to YouTube channel members, also to channel Patreon members, and of course to those of you who leave super thanks on videos like this one. And until next time, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here again soon on Passion for Sound.